In the holy city of Qom, the spiritual and intellectual heart of the Islamic Republic of Iran, a devastating event occurred on day 7 of the conflict, marking a shift from conventional warfare to a deliberate attempt to dismantle a sovereign state. 88 of Iran's most senior religious scholars, those holding the sole legal and spiritual authority to select the successor to the deceased supreme leader, were meeting behind closed doors inside the Assembly of Experts building. This was not merely a religious gathering. It was the only remaining constitutional mechanism to maintain the chain of command in one of the world's most powerful theocracies. Midway through the selection process intended to fill the leadership vacuum, Israeli jets struck the building directly. Witnesses described massive columns of smoke rising from the center of the holy city, a location previously considered untouchable. But folks, the most chilling aspect was not the architectural ruins. It was the statement made by the Israeli ambassador to the United States immediately after on CNN. He did not speak of destroying a building. He spoke of eliminating the people inside, asserting that these electors will not be readily available for any further meetings. We must view this strategic reality clearly. This is no longer a military campaign aimed at munitions depots or nuclear facilities. This is a direct assault on a nation's ability for constitutional succession. By targeting the electoral body at the precise moment they perform their singular function, Israel and its allies are intentionally creating an absolute power vacuum. When the legal mechanism for choosing a leader is physically destroyed, a nation does not just lose its head, it loses its capacity to govern itself. We are witnessing a dangerous precedent in modern warfare. The dismantling of a government not by territorial occupation, but by severing its constitutional lifeline at its very heart. As smoke still shrouded the holy city of Qom, as I just analyzed, Iran delivered its response with a strike that no one in the intelligence community could have predicted in its scale and symbolism. In less than 12 hours, Iran directly attacked 3 United States diplomatic missions in 3 different countries: the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the embassy in Kuwait, and the consulate in Dubai, UAE. You must understand the legal weight of this action. Under international law, an embassy is the sovereign territory of the sending state. A drone strike on the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh is legally equivalent to an attack on American soil. Iran is not just firing back. They are declaring that American sovereignty in the Middle East no longer exists. The images of smoke rising from some of the world's most fortified diplomatic complexes sent a chilling message to every American in the region. No wall is high enough to stop their retaliation. The consequences of this action are a level of chaos we haven't seen since the Second World War. The State Department immediately issued an emergency evacuation advisory for citizens in 14 Middle Eastern countries. 9,000 Americans have already left on their own, while the government is scrambling charter flights and military aircraft for another 1,500 who are stranded. At Abu Dhabi Airport, American citizens have waited in the terrifying silence of their own government while hearing bombs exploding in the distance. The connection here is devastating. By targeting embassies, Iran has forced the United States into a massive civilian retreat, turning our long-standing diplomatic presence into a massive security liability. When embassies must close and citizen services are canceled, American deterrence isn't just wounded, it is being torn apart by the very effort to protect the lives of its citizens. Tonight, the Middle East is no longer a land of strategic alliances. It has become a danger zone where even the American flag over diplomatic buildings is no longer a shield. While the B-2S were still executing their missions, as I just analyzed, another kind of firepower struck Manhattan directly. On Tuesday morning, global financial markets plunged into a state of panic we haven't seen in years. The Dow Jones evaporated more than 900 points at the opening bell. European markets fared even worse, with the Stoxx 600 index dropping nearly 3%. This was not a standard market correction. It was a physical reaction to the world's energy lifeline being set ablaze. The reason for this collapse lies in one name: Ras Tanura. Iran struck Saudi Aramco's largest oil refinery. As satellite imagery showed flames engulfing a facility that provides over 500,000 barrels per day, investors realized the war risk premium had officially arrived. Brent crude surged toward $84 a barrel, up from just $70 a week ago. But folks, this is where a war half a world away begins to touch your wallet. In just 24 hours, the national average gas price in the U.S. jumped 12 cents per gallon. This is the largest single-day increase in 4 years. In California, citizens are already paying $5 per gallon. The connection here is grim. While the administration promises a campaign of total destruction of Iran's military, the American economy is suffering retaliatory economic blows at the pump. Over 1 million passengers are stranded as hubs like Dubai shut down, and billions in market value have vanished. With inflation projected to hit 8.2% if the conflict persists, the question is no longer how much damage the U.S. can inflict on Iran, but how much heat the American economy can take from the fires at Ras Tanura before public support completely collapses. Just days ago, the Israeli military assured the world they had no plans to send troops across the Lebanese border. But folks, the reality of Day 5 has turned those promises into rubble. Israeli ground forces have now pushed deep into southern Lebanon, seizing 16 additional strategic positions they call a buffer zone. But let's be honest, when you deploy tanks to occupy 16 outposts inside another country's territory, it isn't a buffer zone. It is the beginning of a full-scale invasion. This escalation has pushed Lebanon into a state of desperation. The Lebanese government, which has avoided confronting Hezbollah for decades, has now voted to ban all military activities by the group and arrested 12 armed operatives at checkpoints. But can paper decrees stop the fire when Israel is targeting Hezbollah's financial and media facilities across Beirut? The killing of Raza Khazai, the key link between the Iranian military and Hezbollah, shows that Israel is striving to sever every one of Tehran's tentacles right in Lebanon. And amidst that chaos, we witnessed one of the most terrifying consequences of what is known as the fog of war. In Kuwait, a close American ally, the host nation's air defenses accidentally shot down 3 U.S. Air Force F-15 Strike Eagles. Imagine this. In a sky thick with incoming Iranian missiles and outgoing American jets, the defense systems could no longer distinguish friend from foe. Although the pilots ejected safely, losing 3 multi-million-dollar aircraft to the fire of your own ally is a stark reminder. When you push a region into total war, theoretical risks turn into actual tragedies in an instant. Tonight, the battlefield no longer has clear borders. It is a vortex of violence, where even those on the same side are unintentionally destroying one another. While the fires are burning at Ras Tanura and Lebanon, as I just analyzed, a different kind of war is erupting in Washington, right at the heart of the president's own coalition. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stood before reporters on Capitol Hill on Tuesday and issued a chilling declaration. He asserted that the hardest hits against Iran are yet to come, and that the 2 most powerful air forces in the world will defang the regime. This is not the language of a limited military operation. This is the language of an all-out war of destruction aimed at toppling a state. But folks, the question Rubio did not answer, and the question currently setting Capitol Hill on fire is, what comes next? If you wipe out the entire leadership, bomb constitutional meetings, and destroy their military, what exactly do you get in return other than a vast landscape of chaos? Congressional Democrats are aggressively challenging the legal basis for this war, arguing that while the president may have submitted a notification under the War Powers Resolution, a notification can never serve as a substitute for a formal authorization from the people through their representatives. The connection here is staggering. The fracture isn't just coming from the opposition. It is appearing right within the hard core of the MAGA movement. Some of the most powerful voices in conservative media, such as Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, have publicly questioned whether the U.S. is being dragged into a destructive war for the interests of another nation. When the very people who served as the president's media shield begin describing this war as a governance failure of the First Order, the political foundation of the entire operation starts to shift. The president may claim that he alone represents the movement, but when his supporters begin to fear they are fighting an endless war, the political price at home may become far more expensive than any missile ever launched. While politicians and generals calculate the hardest hits as I just analyzed, we must pause to look at the reality of the 90 million people living under that fire. There is an image from this week that says more than any military briefing: the Iranian women's national football team playing in Australia. When the national anthem played, every player stood in silence. Not one sung. In a regime where displaying loyalty to the anthem is mandatory, that silence was a resounding scream of defiance and pain. The Iranian people are not a single, monolithic bloc. They are 90 million individuals with deeply complex feelings about a government that has oppressed them for nearly 5 decades. Tonight, as sacred symbols like the Golestan Palace are damaged and schoolgirls die in airstrikes, we see a nation being torn apart. There are those who cheered from rooftops upon hearing of the leadership's death, but there are millions of others mourning their children and a civilization being dismantled piece by piece. The connection here is utterly cruel. At least 800 civilians have been confirmed killed inside Iran. In Manab alone, a single strike took the lives of 165 schoolgirls. When you destroy the national broadcaster, bomb cultural heritage sites, and attack the very constitutional mechanism for choosing a leader, you are not just defeating an army, you are destroying a people's ability to govern themselves and their very identity. Tonight, the Iranian people face a terrifying reality. They are trapped between a regime that suffocates their freedom and a war that is erasing their children's future. This is not liberation. It is a humanitarian and cultural tragedy whose consequences will haunt this region for generations to come. Everything we have discussed tonight, from the dismantling of the constitutional mechanism in Qom to the retaliation against embassies, leads to the most brutal reality. This war is destroying the very soul of a people. There is an image that will haunt us long after the smoke clears: the Iranian women's national football team standing in silence as the national anthem played in Australia. In a country where displays of loyalty are mandatory, the silence of those women was a supreme act of symbolic defiance. They weren't just refusing to sing for a regime, they were standing in silence for a nation being torn apart from both within and without. But folks, the price of this silence and these geopolitical calculations is being paid in the lives of the innocent. At least 800 civilians have been confirmed killed inside Iran in just 5 days. Most heartbreakingly, in Manab, a single airstrike took the lives of 165 schoolgirls. When cultural heritage sites like Golestan Palace are damaged and schools become tombs, we must ask ourselves, is this liberation or the destruction of a civilization? The final connection we must face tonight is a cold logistical calculus. Experts at the National University of Singapore have issued a warning. The Gulf states are running out of interceptor missiles. If Iran continues, its barrages and defense systems like Patriot or THAAD run dry within the next 1 to 2 weeks, the entire landscape shifts. At that point, the Gulf nations will face a choice: either negotiate directly with Tehran or launch an all-out offensive to save themselves. Tonight, as 150 tankers remain anchored off Hormuz in a state of paralysis, and as the B-2S continue to sear the sky, we realize that the hardest hits promised by Secretary Rubio might just be the end of the order we once knew. This is day 5. I will be back for day 6, because when a country no longer has a constitutional leader and children are dying in their classrooms, the world cannot afford to look away.